Well, hello and welcome to another recording of the Content Marketing Studio. In this series, we look at ways to create better online content faster to help you improve your online presence and drive sales for your business. Today, I am joined by PowerPoint consultant and trainer, Fiona Walsh. Fiona is the owner and founder of Imagine Coaching, and she's on a mission to help businesses present better, offering PowerPoint training and design services to entrepreneurs and corporate professionals. So to begin with, Fiona, a warm welcome to the Content Marketing Studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So just in case people are not sure, we're going to be talking about PowerPoint a lot during our conversation, Fiona.
Mm-hmm. We are, yes.
To begin with, I wanted to ask you, I think these are important questions in these strange times. Where are you and how are you doing?
I'm in Cork in Ireland. So that's right down the southern part of Ireland. And I'm doing quite well. Yeah, doing quite well, thank you.
So this passion and this mission you're on now of helping people present better using PowerPoint, where did that begin, this passion for PowerPoint as a tool?
Yeah, interesting. I used to work for a cosmetics company as a scientist and in an R&D centre, and I started, long story, but started doing training basically for a new system that the company was implementing, and I was helping do that, do formulation management basically. And from there, I went on to do an IT teacher training course, and then went on to train as Microsoft Office specialist. And with those two qualifications, you get the Microsoft Master Instructor certification. So that's for trainers, certified trainers and Microsoft Office specialists. And then I started doing some in-house training in that R&D facility. It was mostly Outlook and PowerPoint, funnily enough, because the company would have created quite a few presentations for events, around Europe. And I would have been helping people out with their presentations and just refining them and making them look good, making them, they would have been very corporate, but just giving them that professional edge and making sure everything was aligned and making sure it looked well, and helping them with the imagery as well, finding images that would have, matched the concept that they were trying to create. And I guess it started from there really, because I realized that you could make a presentation look really, really good. And knew how to do it as well. I guess what I've found is that many people haven't had training in PowerPoint ever, so they're self-taught, and there's lots of things they don't know. They would be able to up their game so much more just by knowing some of the basics to make things so much easier for them, really.
I think you're absolutely right about the self-taught. I mean, I remember vaguely that I only went on one Microsoft Excel course in my entire career from organized by my employer, only because at the time the company that I was working for had acquired an e-commerce business. So we're talking the late 90s, early 2000s. And suddenly we found ourselves having to create lots of reports about the performance of the site and so on. So there was a need for us to understand Excel. And I was absolutely blown away about all the things I didn't know about Excel because I was self-taught. I was thinking, well, I wonder if this is the same in Microsoft Word. And what about PowerPoint? There's got all these, not so much hidden facets, but I find, Fiona, and I'm sure your clients are the same, that because time is against you, you kind of know what you know and you stick with it. And I would like you today to be kind of, to give us encouragement to be more curious and invite us to look at different ways in which you can use PowerPoint, because you do two things. You help us be more time efficient with PowerPoint, but actually then the extra time we've reclaimed can be used to further improve the presentation. So I'm really excited. I will confess that I am not a big fan of Outlook, so I've given up on that a long time ago, but you have your chance to change my mind. So you are doing a lot actually for your customers. I was checking out your brand new website. Well done. And so you're offering PowerPoint training, template design, presentation design, presentation review, which I think is a lovely touch, bespoke training and presentation coaching. So actually, I wanted to touch on presentation reviews and design. And have you got some initial recommendations and suggestions for us to look into to improve vastly both how productive we're going to be, but also the impact to the people listening and watching the slides?
Yeah, I think it really depends on a number of factors. One is the audience. What's it for? So who are you presenting to? For example, a couple of weeks ago, I worked on a presentation, about 45, 50 slides. And it was somebody who was doing a full day's training. They were doing it for a client, and the client had specified, we want this content in there. So there was lots of content in there. So what my initial response was, what can you take out? Because there's lots of text on the slides. And the person said, yeah, I had the same thought. I felt there was too much information in there. Cut it down as much as they could. And they said, the client has basically said, I want this information on the slides. Okay, fine. So you're limited then as to what you can work with. So for that example, it was bulleted, lots of bullet points. I just took the bullets out because they look old-fashioned, left it a bit cleaner. I put some icons in because I think if you just stick a picture on when you've got text and bullets, effectively bullets, it just looks like it's stuck on. So instead, I went for icons because I think the icons then they can blend in with the presentation because you can change the colour. So it's probably wasn't great, but I suppose it was very functional. Because she was delivering a full day's training, there was a lot of information to get across, and then the trainees would have had that presentation afterwards to refer back to. Okay, so that's an example of, you're not going to have a full picture on a slide with no text because they need to have the text, It's a different kind of context. Whereas other presentations might be very emotive, and it might just be a picture with one word and you're going to talk about it. So it really just depends on your audience, as to what your presentation is going to be, really, I think.
And do you think that on that point that we, as in the people who are instrumental in organizing this presentation, so it'll be you, perhaps the presenter, the webinar host, the sales professional working for an organization, are you saying that we need to spend just a bit longer almost on the brief and before rushing into opening and putting things together?
Yeah, that would be the first thing I would want to know from a client. What's your audience? How many people are in your audience? How are you delivering the presentation? Is it in person? Is it online? Because some people now are doing in-person, presentations. So I'd want to know those questions. What's the purpose of it? What are they actually trying to do? Are they trying to just give information? Is there a sale at the end? What's the purpose of the presentation? And I'd want to know all that information before thinking, and also the topic of it as well. Like what's the main message here? And I think it depends on. I don't mean how serious it is, but it also depends on the actual topic as well. Because you could have somebody that's maybe presenting, on a wellness type theme, and that can probably be, you can probably have nice imagery, and it can be a little bit, it would be different maybe to something that would be a bit more of a serious topic. Like for example, the training the training presentation that I mentioned a few moments ago, it was the pharmaceutical industry, which is very heavily regulated, quite serious industry. So if we had some nice images in there, it might not. It may not be quite as appropriate, because of the topic, and it was, quite a serious sort of training. So I think it does depend. Now, that doesn't mean say you can't make it lighthearted and that you wouldn't use any images. It's just that I suppose that presentation was more of a makeover because it was kind of already done, and it was a quick, how can I make it look a little bit better without starting completely from scratch again,
Mm-hmm. In my line of work, obviously, I deal with digital. It's my core offering. So what I have found is I've been supporting people who have moved from in-person events to doing webinar, virtual conferences, and so on. And I've warned them, but many of them have been caught up by this idea of the PowerPoint assets you had for in-person don't necessarily translate so well online, where there's a lot that you can't do. So sometimes what you find is you have to work just a bit harder, or actually on this occasion, add a little bit more information to break down, the delivery of the information. But the other thing that I'll ask people to be more careful about is the choice around calligraphy and font. Do you find yourself as well having to look into that?
Definitely, yeah. I find quite a lot of people come to me with a presentation, and it's in the it's not in the widescreen size. So that means you've got two black portions down the side of your screen when you're online, basically, or on a monitor as well. It could still be in person and on a monitor in a smaller meeting room. So that presentation has been designed for an overhead projector, basically. And then the same thing, vice versa. If you've got a widescreen presentation and you're using it on an overhead projector, you're going to have two black bars along the top. So you're not utilising the full space on your screen. That's the first thing. Secondly, the contrast. Because if you're doing an overhead projector presentation, you can get caught out with the contrast because you never really know what that machine is like until you try it. So I would tend to have always said go for a paler background with darker text on it. Sometimes if you've got dark pictures, they don't always show up very well. You know, you could have this lovely image which would look fantastic on a monitor, but on an overhead projector, it can be lost completely. So I would have, tended to advise against that. But on the other side, when we're doing things online and we've got a monitor, we can use some lovely, we can create some lovely slides because we can use dark colors with lighter fonts. We can get great images because people can see the images, providing they're good quality. That's my other bugbear, is when people have an image that they've maybe just taken a snip from and it's poor quality, and then they try and make it bigger and you can't see it. So that's another thing that I strongly advise against. And another follow-on from that is where people stretch an image as well, and they distort the aspect ratio, and then they've got a not very good image. But there's definitely an opportunity, I think, to experiment with colour as well if we're in the online environment, for sure. And also you mentioned fonts there, but I think there's also an opportunity to have more on a slide. Now, I don't mean you can start writing paragraphs of information. That's not what I mean. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to write paragraphs of information and read it off the slide, there's no point in you presenting. You might as well just send it as a white paper or something like that. However, I do think there's an opportunity to have a little bit more content because people are looking straight at it. They're not looking at it over there and can't see what's on the slide. So it does give you an opportunity to have maybe smaller fonts and more information on a slide.
No, I would agree. I mean, when I had to pretty much redesign my training courses for the online world, I found myself, actually, I can just add a little note here that I would normally either say or put on the flip chart, in the room, that kind of things. And what I have found as well is by pretty much going 100% online for the last year, I've been a bit more daring, in fact, with my choice of images because I wanted some time to convey either an emotion or to kind of get people to be stimulated, because I was very, very aware that they were sat there in their kitchen or in their spare bedroom having to sustain goodwill and attention to the presentation. So I found myself a lot more creative as well with it.
Yeah. And I also like some of the tools. There's a couple out there. One is Menti, menti.com, and then there's Poll Everywhere. They're great tools for using in the middle of a PowerPoint presentation where you can get live feedback. So, for example, you can have word clouds where you ask your audience. So you're still in the PowerPoint presentation. It's like a slide that would insert into the presentation, and the slide will come up, and there'll be a question there. You can obviously speak through the question. We're going to ask for some live feedback. And then people at home will be either on their phone or on their computer, and then they can put the information in, and the information will come up on the screen. So they do both. I think have a word cloud, which I particularly like. I just think that's really good when you can see. You might ask people, what do you think after the first morning of the course? What are your thoughts? One word, and then you can see all these words pop up, and you get a feeling for how the training is going or the mood of your audience, and I think that's quite good.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about those two. Thanks for the reminder. Ashley, whilst you're on the subject of tools and apps, anything else that you have yourself in your toolkit or up your sleeve that you use to, again, add to the enjoyment, really, for the recipients?
Yeah, there's, can't think of the word of it, which one it is now. Pixels is one of the images add-ins that'll open the toolbar for you. It basically puts together the free images that you can use without having to go to another website. I think it has on Splash and various other free images that you can use, but it's integrated, or you can, if you haven't got it, depending on what version of PowerPoint you have, you can put an add-in in there, and it just opens up as a sidebar, and you can type in a word and it'll give you images that would represent that word, and then you can just pop them straight into your presentation, and that there's no copyright issues with that. So that's kind of a handy one to have. And I can't quite remember the other one. I think it's the Noun Project Noun Project. And that's icons, basically. Again, depending on what version you're using, you may have limited icons, and then you can put icons in that one. And you can also colour those as well. So you can choose what colour to have those to match the presentation.
Super. No, I can see that. Again, this idea of you save yourself maybe 30 seconds, but it's 20 times 30 seconds or it's 50 times 30 seconds, and very, very quickly, you can therefore spend more time on the design.
Yeah.
You mentioned versions. So do you have recommendations, or what is that we need to be aware of?
A lot of the tools that I'm finding people don't know about when I'm training them are actually tools that have been in Office for a long, long time. So yes, there are newer items in the more recent versions. But a lot of the things people don't know about are things that have been around since I trained in 2007, and they're standard items that have been around then. So I suppose, back to this concept of people not having training. Do you know what I mean? I suppose it's back to that, really. I was in a training session a couple of weeks ago, and somebody said to me, out of interest, can you remove the background? And I said, oh, yeah, you can. And that, again, that's something it's not great. You know, sometimes it's a bit tricky to work with. But I was working with demonstrating headshots and the aspect ratio and how to take your headshot, put it into a nice circle, basically, and keeping the aspect ratio the same very quickly just by using the cropping tools. So a couple of clicks, job done. And the person said, oh, can you remove background? And I said, oh, yeah, you can. And I did it with my headshot. And because it was a nice, clean, white background, it removed it perfectly. So I said, yep, you can do that there. They were like, wow, I never knew that existed. Like, I thought you had to go to Canva to do it and then come back out of Canva. I said, no, it depends on the background, though. There is an option to, sort of draw in with a pencil the bits you want to remove. So it depends on the image, but that can work very well. But again, an old tool, not new.
I know exactly what you mean. I get the same reaction with other digital tools. So, do you have any other wow moments from your trainees then? So we had the remove in the background, but I know that this menu at the top is busy. And as is often the case with those platforms, there's no instructions. I mean, you've literally got to be a bit more daring and click away. But what would you suggest we should look into ourselves?
One of them would be reusing slides. So when you go, are you familiar with that function?
Not.
Okay.
Well, perhaps I am, but I don't call it that. But please tell us.
It's actually called reuse slides, so you probably don't know it then. So when you go to add a new slide, there's a drop-down menu, and you can pick the layout type. And right at the bottom of that menu, there's 3 different written options, and the very bottom one is reuse slides. When you click on that, it opens up a sidebar, and you have the option to navigate to another presentation that you've used previously, and you can insert slides from another presentation, and right at the bottom of that slide, at that sidebar, you have a little tick box which says keep source formatting. So that means your slide will come in exactly as it was in the other presentation. So it won't pick up the new formatting of the new presentation. Okay. Now, I know in Mac, it puts the whole presentation in, and in Windows, you can click which slide you want. So you can just put random slides in from other presentations, and they will be exactly as they were. Because sometimes when you copy and paste, you're not copying everything, and it kind of gets a bit tricky. And again, it's time consuming. So that's a really, really quick one to bring other slides in. Now, it does bring in the slide master from the other presentation, but a lot of the time that doesn't really matter too much. Sure. Another one I find people don't know is to reset the slide. So if you have, if you've got maybe lots of content and you want to keep it aligned, so probably more for corporate presentations where you've got a certain format and you want to keep that alignment, sometimes you might accidentally click on one of the placeholders and drag it out of the way when you're trying to do something else, and then you're trying to pop it back again and you don't get it in the right place. If you reset a slide, it will put it back, the placeholders will go back to their original position. So then you know the alignment is correct. That's another one. Replace fonts. You can replace all the fonts in a presentation in one go. That's another one. That's on the home tab.
As opposed to going through every single slide one by one and
you do format painter, but again, you'd still be format painting. You get sick of painting. You have to know the font that you've got to start with. So say you've got Arial. Everywhere you have Arial, you can change it to something else. So if you've got more than one font, then you might have to sort of check through just to make sure what other fonts you've got. But it'll replace them in the whole presentation, just in one go. And then another one that I like, I mentioned earlier about people changing the images, maybe distorting the images slightly, making the image larger than it was, and then maybe it's too pixelated when it's on the screen, which you would notice a lot on monitors, or the size is distorted. When you click on a picture, it opens up the picture format tab, and there's a reset button, but underneath that's a drop-down menu, and there's reset picture and size. So if you click on that one, it'll take it back to the original, and then you can format it from there if it's been sort of accidentally changed a little bit. Those would probably be my top tips off the top of my head.
Super. Are there some functions and features in PowerPoint that either people are overuse or that you yourself think, yeah, I can see why it was invented, but there's no merit in using that?
Let me think. Probably not. I would use most of the functionality, to be honest. The format painter I would use a lot, because the format painter is great. Say if you have a shape, you're trying to do an infographic, you have a shape and you've maybe put some gradients in there and you've got shadowing, you can copy that formatting to your other shapes as well. That's another thing that you can do. Excuse me. It's the cough coming in. What else? Or another one of my favorite tips as well would be the eyedropper tool. So if you go to change the color of something, it could be text, it could be content, it could be a shape. You go to change the color, and then again at the bottom you have this little icon, and if you click on that and then hover over anything else on the slide, it could be a logo you've brought in, it could be a color on a picture that you want to pick out, and you click on that and it'll basically make that content the same color as you've chosen. So you don't have to know what color it is, or don't have to try and guess. It'll just do that for you automatically.
So that saves the time sending emails to the marketing department asking for the brand guidelines.
Yeah, I did a presentation, just a tidy up of someone's presentation recently. Their logo was in it, and it was white background, which didn't really work. And I wanted to change it to a blue of their logo. I think it was white background, and their logo was blue background with white writing on it. And it just stuck in the corner. I thought, just do the whole slide blue. So eyedropper tool, didn't need to find out what color was. Click, job done. Very, very quickly to change the background of the slides.
What is your view about using the sign templates? I can sometimes use them, sometimes I just bypass depending on my mood and how I'm working. But would you say that it is helpful to set them up before you begin the work of creating the whole presentation?
Do you mean the templates?
As in the masters, the slide masters.
Slide masters. Yeah, definitely. The presentation that I was working on the other day, the training one, if that had been done in the slide master, it would have been so much easier. It wouldn't have spent me half a lot as long to tidy it up, basically. So yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people don't know what the slide master is. And I remember when I first started working in slide masters, that would have been in Office 2007, and the slide master was really clunky. And you'd make changes, they wouldn't always replicate through to the presentation, and it'd be very frustrating, didn't always know why. I find now it's much easier, much easier. So pretty much anybody can use that now. One thing to note with Slide Master, though, if you have only the online version of Office 365, you don't have the Slide Master. You need the offline version.
Oh,
because it's limited. You'll notice that the menus are limited. So there's a few things you don't have in just the online version, and that's one of them, Slide Master.
Are there elements on the online version out of interest that are present that maybe are not present on the offline, and vice versa?
Yeah, the design options one is very nice, where if you have images in the slide, and you can just click and it'll bring up this sidebar and it'll show you just various options and you change them around. So they are very nice, but it's more it's not affecting your slide master. It's just the slide, so it's the information in the slide, and it's almost like an image then. So once you choose that, you can't really edit it very much. So they're good if you want something quick. But it depends what you're doing. If you wanted the slide master, then you'd almost need to take an image and recreate that to pop it into the slide master.
Is that, forgive me, is that for the online version that you have that option of suggestions as such?
Yeah, I think that's 365. So that's in the online or the offline version of 365.
One thing I discovered purely by accident, which I was quite excited about, I was actually looking into Microsoft Word, but the 365 version online. I was looking at dictation to begin with. I was looking at ways which I could maybe transcribe things and so on. And in the process, I discovered that they could accommodate foreign languages. And then they announced, I think, that they could try and translate. So I could, for example, speak in French, it would translate into English. I thought, That is pretty amazing. And I thought, I wonder if there's something similar on PowerPoint 365. So I went on the online version, and sure enough, there is a dictation version and translation, and that just blew my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Did you try the translation one?
I did. I spoke French very fast, and he did a very, very good job. And the reverse equally. So I spoke in English to get a French translation. So just for our viewers and listeners, it gets captioned in your target language. And then I read some articles where they were saying that if you do the presentation online, you can send a code and people can choose which language they want to get it captioned. And I mean, if it was using artificial intelligence, clearly. But I was very, very impressed with the quality of the translation, but also obviously from the accessibility point of view, I thought, yeah, why not? You present in English, you get captioned in English, and people can watch it online.
Yeah, it's very good. There's a lot of work. I'm seeing lots of notifications of different or additional options around that tool, actually. So I think there's definitely a lot of work going into that at the moment.
Yeah, so for everybody, just go and check the online version. You can be very, very surprised. One thing that I'm always uncertain about, I thought, forgive me, perhaps I was a bit lazy. I thought, since I'm talking to Fiona, I won't look into it. I'll ask Fiona directly. Is it possible to record anything or to capture anything via PowerPoint as such?
To record?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. There's actually a screen not really capture, screen video option in PowerPoint. So you can use that, and you can do a screen video of something outside of PowerPoint, and then have that video. So it'll save a video for you. So like some of the video capture software, it actually has that installed in it. And I think that's in some of the older versions. Again, that's not just in Office 365 either. Microsoft 365 as it's called now. They've dropped the Office.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to keep up with.
Yeah, it'll take a long time for people to get used to saying Microsoft 365 rather than Office. But then it has OneNote and it has the online storage, doesn't it, and OneDrive and all the rest. So that's the reason for the change. So yeah, you can record. You can do an awful lot of things that people don't realise. I mean, you can create videos with, as in, you can use the animation to create a video, so that you send somebody like a video file with PowerPoint.
Okay.
So you can use your animation smartly and have your presentation run automatically, so that it's creating a video file with your images.
All right. So we've applied the transition, we've applied the animation on the slides, and then I'm going to save it as a movie as such, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you need to be smart with your animation. You know what I mean? You need to be smart with the way you use the animation. But you can do a lot of things like that even with it that look quite smart.
Because I know you could. Sometimes I'm asked a question, so I know you can save PowerPoint as images, as PDF, but I've never actually tried. What you've described, which is essentially the animated presentation. Essentially, because I go straight to video as opposed to that. But can you record the audio, or do you need to do that separately?
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, recording the audio is not a new thing. That's an old thing. And also, I suppose this is for going back to, a long time ago. A lot of this functionality would have been for exhibitions and presentation booths. So you can have a PowerPoint presentation, you can have narration and the speech in there, and you can just have it on loop. So you can just loop. You would have had, your small monitor in your little box. And
that's taking me back. Yes.
Because I know I'm thinking of when I would have seen that many, many years ago, going to exhibitions and that. But yeah, it would just be looping, and it would be through PowerPoint. So you can just set it to just continue on. And there is a rehearse option where you can go through. It'll record your audio, and it'll also set the transitions up to the timings that you're going through the presentation, and then you can save that and loop it, basically.
As you can tell, I'm making note of all the homework you're giving us, Fiona, and this is great. But so we began the conversation with don't rush onto your keyboard. Have a brief. Dare I say, start to doodle what the slide masters could look like potentially. Just pen and paper. When on the rare occasion I kind of teach visual storytelling, I've got printed out what I call storyboards. So essentially, they are rectangles all lined up, and you can start to sketch inside the boxes. Where will the logo go? Where, what will be the colors? Because I find the pen and paper stuff before you go onto the keyboard will help you be very efficient. And then knowing what you need to design, spend a moment, and the list here is quite extensive. What are the different features and functions of PowerPoint that can save you time? And again, it's multiples of 20, 30 seconds, but you could save half an hour here, an hour there. That means that it's small time on rehearsing, small time on checking, and that kind of things. Talking of checking, you provide obviously that review service, which is great. But a lovely thing that you do is that you send your review as video. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Because this is the content marketing studio. So what tools do you use to record the video and send that to your client as a review?
Loom. Just use it through Loom.
Brilliant. Yeah. Big fan.
Yeah.
And is that what you use for those lovely LinkedIn videos as well?
I'm using Screencast, actually. I'm using a bit of both between the two of them. So Screencast for the LinkedIn.
Loom and Screencast. We'll add that onto your recommended tool. So if you haven't had the pleasure yet of watching Fiona's LinkedIn videos, they're great. I mean, it's just a couple of minutes, but you really, as you've done in this conversation, makes it go, wow. Or more importantly, I find with PowerPoint, I forget more than so that's also the issue. But you've got lovely ones where you have questions. So do you find it a challenge when presenting to stop sharing your screen and then fumble about to share it again? So, well, yes, if you don't know the trick, which is...
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a lot of people, I see all the time, people share their screen, they share their PowerPoint screen so you can see their setup before they start playing the presentation, and then they play the presentation. So what you can do, if you have two screens, you can start the presentation. So on one screen, you have your presentation running. You don't need to, this isn't necessarily to do with the presenter view, this is just in general. Start the presentation. Then when you go to Zoom, you click on share screen, and one of those options will be the PowerPoint presentation, the slideshow of the PowerPoint presentation. So you click on that and you share the slide as you want your audience to see it, rather than the software before you've clicked play the presentation. So I find a lot of people aren't aware of that one.
No, I think it works really well. One trick that I learned quite late on, actually, as a PowerPoint user, is that if you make notes, as I sometimes do, what I call my chapter slides, so we have module 1, 2, 3, and as a trainer, sometimes you jump about or you move around reacting to questions. So I have a piece of paper where I've noted the number of my chapter slides. So if someone asks a question, I can go 45, press enter, and it takes you to that number.
Yeah, it's another very handy one. Yeah, definitely.
Now, you could argue that that's rather clunky. I don't know if there's a better way to move around your presentation.
Probably not if you're doing it that way. If you have sections of slides, excuse me, if you have sections of slides, let's say you're presenting, maybe not a training environment, because in a training environment, it's a bit more informal. But let's say you're presenting formally and you have a set amount of time. Maybe you've wanted to have questions during the presentation, people have asked you questions, and then you're running out of time at the end. So what you can do is you can set up little action buttons. You can set up an action button in a slide so that when you click on that, it'll jump through to a specified slide. So let's say you've got a natural ending 5 slides before the end. You can set that up so that it'll then go to the last slide. So you can miss out those 4 if they're not, you can sort of take it or leave it whether you present those or not. So there's actual action buttons that you can insert, or you can do it as a hyperlink, set it up manually as a hyperlink. The action buttons, you can see those. The hyperlink, you could do it, say, on an image, or if you have an image or some content in the slide there, and then you don't see anything. So, you'd be clicking and you wouldn't see that you were actually doing.
So it's almost like if you're creating almost like a website where you would have many options.
Yeah.
And those action buttons will take you to...
Yeah.
And I can imagine, them being organized neatly at the bottom so that you can move around, reacting to the audience again.
Yeah. So again, it would be tricky to set up. You wouldn't be setting that up on every slide, but if you knew there was a block of X amount of slides that you could choose to, miss out if time didn't allow, then you could do it to go to the next slide, or, the next few, miss those couple out. and also back again. So, if you know that it's a question, often you get people asking, oh, can you go back to that one? Or we're really interested in that one.
Then you have into.
So, pop back to that one and then back again.
Nice. So again, it's back to this idea of preempting, of rehearsing, using colleagues to present to them, and then for them to play the client who wants to go back to the beginning, or asking for further questions and so on. Brilliant. The one video, there was one which I thought was funny, was do you get annoyed when you see distorted images of people in presentations? And then you give the answer to that, which you mentioned again about resetting. But the also one, which I thought, once again, I knew it, then I didn't use it, therefore I forgot about it. But you talk about how to reorganize and realign content.
Yes.
Both in terms of horizontal, but also distribution.
Absolutely.
So I put the link in the show notes for that video, but you kind of go, the amount of time you waste trying to kind of drag it, and until eventually, I mean, I use guidelines a lot for my background in design, but that was a clever trick as well.
Yeah. And again, I think that's, when I'm doing a presentation makeover, that's the tools, or those are the tools I'd be using most. It's aligning the content, making it look perfect and professional. And that's one of the tools I'd be using most. So with the grid lines or guidelines, if you've got the later versions, you would have, when you're aligning two pieces of content, you'd have a red bar in between them, red lines, small red lines, so you can see whether they're aligned. But the distributing them, that's where you wouldn't see that very well. And also, if you've got lots and lots of content on the slide, it can be difficult to keep doing that. So if you just highlight them all and use that functionality, it's much easier. But definitely distributing one is good, so that you've got the same gap in between each of the items if you have lots of content. Particularly good for infographics. If you're doing some work, infographic type content, then it's particularly good for that.
I think for me, the conclusion I've reached a long time ago when it comes to presentation shared visually, whether it's a website, whether it's a social media post, whether it's PowerPoint, is this idea. I mean, you talked about contrast. I've got another one called clutter, and then I've got another one called cohesion, which is this idea of, if you give the impression, rightly so, that you've taken the time to compile this presentation, then your audience will think more favorably about both you, the message, the outcome, and so on. If, on the contrary, and it could be lack of time, lack of understanding and training, it hasn't got the contrast, the clutter, and the cohesion working for you, the impression you give is that you've not taken the time. And people make a link, don't they, between first impressions and the outcome of the service or the product or whichever key message you have in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And another thing I find very distracting as well when we're online is too much animation or fancy transitions. I'm just thinking of a presentation I sat through recently, and it was one of these transitions where, for me, each slide sort of went off into the corner and then flew back out. And at one point, the presenter wanted to flick back to slides, and they were just flicking through back. It was, I had to look away. It was just, whoa, too much action for me.
No, I mean, I suppose I still look at PowerPoint almost as a video editor. So for me, it's what is the purpose of the transition? And is it to reset the mind? Is it to symbolize that we're moving on to something a bit different? So there has to be a language in and around transition. But I'm just starting making notes about distractions. So you mentioned bullet points. It's something, funny enough, that turned me off quite early on in my career. It reminded me maybe too much of the old-fashioned classroom where the teacher would go point by point and you had to learn by rote. We'd talk about animations and transition. Just be smart about how you use them. Are there other form of distractions? I mean, I think we've moved away now from using clip art too much, but you tell me whether you still see clip art appearing.
I do. Yeah, I do. I've had a couple of presentations where they're actually very good presentations, but they just needed updating because the clip art was in there and it was old-fashioned. And some of them, and then somebody else told me they were attending a presentation recently online, and there was a little clip art thing, and it just kept doing this, rotating or what have you in the corner on the slide. Again, very frustrating, because you just couldn't help sort of staring at it, because you wouldn't be focusing on somebody if it was just something kind of
Maybe they got inspiration from the 24-hour news channel, the little logo,
Yeah.
the Earth spinning around.
Yeah. So yeah, I do still see them. It's where people have had presentations for a long time and they still have those in. Yeah.
I sat through a presentation once, and I kind of understood why, but it was tricky, where they use animated GIFs throughout. Okay. So instead of an image, which would be my preference, it was just this animation looping over and over again as they were explaining something. And again, it's by this idea of, what is the purpose? What are you trying to achieve? How is it helping you and the audience understand the message? And I think when there are things on trend, we've got to be careful.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think, as I say, with the animation, I mean, some of the animations ever so fancy, you've got these spinning things. And I mean, what's the purpose of those? Now, if you really were, now, obviously, a lot of these are called emphasis. So if you were trying to emphasize something, that's fine. But then you find people using it through the whole presentation, and it loses its impact then. So if you did want to emphasize something, you can use them, but just use them sparingly, really, I think. And as you said, the same with the transitions. It's actually a nice transition in PowerPoint, and it's curtains. So it's like a set of curtains that would fold back, okay? So the slide folds back with the curtains. Now, if you have a product launch, okay, you can get an image from a free image of red curtains, like a theatre opening, and that will then the curtains will actually go back like this, and that looks really nice if you've got your your product, whatever that is, as the backdrop to that. It look really, really good, and it's in PowerPoint. It's going to take you a couple of minutes to do it. Looks great, but if you do that on every slide, it just loses its impact.
No, and that's the thing, which is why you need to spend time to rehearse and get feedback. Because sometimes when you've designed it, it's a bit to me like back in the days of writing tenders. When you finish writing that proposal, you just exhausted. So you can't see it. You can't see the typos. You can't see the repetitions. You can't see the poor layout. And therefore, part of creating your PowerPoint presentation, it's a project in its own right. There has to be a beginning, middle, and an end. And be careful you have enough time at the end for that feedback loop with colleagues and that kind of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Super. So before we say goodbye, because sadly our time together is coming to an end, I would like to take part in a fun quiz. When I say fun, it'd be fun for me. You'll tell me afterwards if you enjoyed taking part. But once again, thank you so much. I mean, I've taken literally 2 pages of notes of things to look into. And I really appreciate you taking the time to just make us a bit more aware, a bit more curious about, I think, a very important tool. I mean, albeit all trainers and presenters should be able to do without PowerPoint. I've been there. I don't know if you have, where the projector bulb has blown off, or there was a power cut and so on. So we can all do without. But it's a great, great companion and presentation aid. And I'm a big fan of the product. But I'm going to look at ways to be more productive.
What I would say on that, though, is it depends how people learn, because I'm a visual learner. So I learn by seeing things. You know what I mean? I did a VARC questionnaire recently on how you learn. So VARC is visual, oral, reading, or kinesthetics are doing, basically.
That's right.
And I'm visual, basically. When it comes to listening, and I'm not saying I don't listen, but I don't learn by listening. So I don't listen to podcasts, and now I know why. It's only when I did the test, it's like, so that's why I don't listen to podcasts. I'll happily watch a video, but I don't do podcasts. Now I know why. So visual is my thing. So it's all very well people saying, oh, you shouldn't be using PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, but not for visual learners, because that's what they want. They want to see the imagery. That's how they learn, by seeing that. Now I know that if you were on a webinar, you're also looking at the person. But it's just that imagination of using that imagery and having that content there, could mean that some people will learn that way, and others won't.
And just before actually move on to the quiz, sorry, Fiona, let's move on. Let's talk about this death by PowerPoint sentence. I think it's a very unfair one, because to begin with, it's rarer nowadays. It still happens, but I think people do an amazing job using the tools of the time, and it's not the fault of the tool. So, it's a presenter that has decided to do it that way, but it's not the tool that is to be blamed.
Yeah. It was actually, it wasn't a business arrangement, it was more of a friend, but I was doing an event and this person was speaking and it was all text on the slide. And I had to kind of politely say, right, okay, I was helping her out, but I said, look, let's get rid of this. And when she presented, so we changed it a bit, we took most of the slide content away, we had a few images. She was the best presenter ever. She was brilliant. She had the audience in her hand. It was just before lockdown, before we had a room of 70 people, several of us presented. She had the audience in her hand. She didn't even need PowerPoint. So it just goes to show. I mean, she had it, I think, because she felt that the rest of us were and that she needed to. She didn't need it. She would have been absolutely perfect without it. So it does go to show that not everybody needs one. However, if she'd have had the presentation as she had it originally, it was just paragraphs of text that she wanted to read out.
Yeah. I have sympathy for that because it helps, or it gives the impression it's going to be helpful to you to deal with nerves and so on. But in my experience, it has the opposite effect, both for you and the audience.
Yeah, which was interesting because if she'd have read that, she'd have lost her audience and she didn't need it. So she knew her content. She was perfect. She was really, really entertaining as well.
Smashing. Thank you very much. All right. Well, let's begin with question number 1. If you could have a Zoom call with a celebrity, perhaps from the world of business or entertainment, who would you invite?
Oh, Brené Brown. She's entertaining.
Yeah. Absolutely. Would you record it?
Yeah.
Well, whilst we're on the subject of being online, because we are spending more time online, all of us, if you could organize your own private online concert, which artist or band would play for you and the family?
Oh, now there's a question. I always really wanted to see, and I never got the chance. I always wanted to see Prince. Never got the chance. I had tickets to see him in Dublin and he cancelled. And when I don't know whether he actually came back before he passed away. So if that's allowed, I would say Prince because I missed out on that.
It is allowed, particularly because I'm probably Prince #1 fan in France and in the UK. I was very lucky. I saw him often.
Yeah.
But his very last concert, A Piano on the Mic, I think it was called, that got cancelled, and unfortunately he passed away. So very, very good choice. Well, whilst you are enjoying this amazing Prince concert, which food would you like to order for you and the family to enjoy?
Oh, what food would I like to order? Now, having not been in a restaurant for such a long time, God, my mouth is watering. Probably some sort of fish dish. Something, something nice.
Absolutely. Now, if you could have your own radio show, what would you talk about and who would be your co-host?
Oh, gosh, what would I talk about? I would probably talk about presenting, confidence. I'm also a trained coach, so that's another, hence the Brené Brown suggestion there. So I'd probably talk about presenting, but more from a confidence point of view rather than an actual PowerPoint point of view. And who would be my co-host? Do you know how I'm going to say it? Louise Brogan. I think she's brilliant.
Ah, yes.
She speaks so well. Every time, I remember the first time I was listening to her and I felt like she was talking to me and I didn't even know her. I really like her style. So yeah, I'm going to say Louise.
No, smashing. Wonderful choice. Well, listen, final question for you. You might be pleased to know. I know these are very strange times and we've not been able to travel much, as you mentioned a moment ago. But when things are back to normal, where would you like to go and travel to, you and the family?
I want to go to Birmingham, go home and see my mom.
Right.
Yeah. You'll get me in tears now in a minute.
No. So, well, we'll send all the good stuff out there in the universe and the interweb, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah,
thank you so much for spending some time on the Content Marketing Studio. I wanted for you to give us just that nudge and the kick up the derriere, as we say, where I come from, to just investigate this very important tool for all of us, whether you are a webinar host, whether you are working sales and marketing, whether you are someone that needs to convey an important message out there, whether it's fundraising for charity and so on. You know that we are all in some ways having to present something. And if we can bring imagery and text to support us in making an audience feel something and engage with a key message, it's all the more important. We've got to be careful. We've got to do this in a way that's productive, and you've shown us ways to do that. We've got to do something that is supportive, not distracting. And you also warned us about that. So big thank you. For our viewers and listeners who'd like to know more about you, Fiona Walsh, and your services, where can they find out more about you on the interweb?
They can find me on LinkedIn. If you look for Fiona Wash 1, you'll find me on LinkedIn. And my website as well is www.imaginecoaching.ie. And you can find out a little bit about me and the services that I offer on the website.
Super. Well, once again, Fiona, big thank you. Big thank you to your viewers and listeners. Until the next one, go out there and make sure your content is better and faster. Bye for now.
Bye.